One of them was found bludgeoned to death in a case that has never been solved. 3 of the men playing Nazis were Jewish refugees who had fled Hitler, and one filmed every single episode with a concentration camp number tattooed on his arm. 61 years later, this is where all of them ended up. Behind the trademark smirk of the confident Allied resistance leader stood a clean-cut television star whose real-world control was slowly slipping away. Born Robert Edward Crane on July 13, 1928, in Waterbury, Connecticut. Before capturing the national spotlight, Crane built his career in the high-energy arena of radio broadcasting, dominating the airwaves at WMAQ in Chicago and hosting his own top-rated morning comedy program, The Bob Crane Show. Listeners loved his quick wit and wholesome family man charm, a reputation that made him a natural fit for television. This clean-cut broadcasting image paved the way for his massive 1965 breakthrough as Colonel Robert Hogan. Off-screen, Crane's family life appeared equally conventional, defined by his marriage to Ann Terzian, and later to Sigrid Valdis, with verified children documented across both family records. Yet, beneath the polished family man facade lay a restless, secretive, double life. Crane compiled extensive private archives of photographs and videotapes, frequently drawn to a nocturnal world of escorts and nightlife. After the sitcom concluded, these private habits followed him into the grueling routine of regional dinner theater work. Colonel Hogan projected control in every escape plan. Bob Crane's documented private life divided public respectability from concealed risk. On June 29, 1978, Bob Crane was found bludgeoned to death in his Scottsdale, Arizona apartment. The autopsy identified multiple blunt force injuries to his head, alongside a separate electrical cord injury around his neck. His co-star, Victoria Ann Barry, discovered his body after Crane failed to show up for a scheduled meeting while performing locally in the play Beginner's Luck. Investigators focused on a camera tripod as the suspected murder weapon, though it was never found. Suspicion soon fell on Crane's associate, John Henry Carpenter, after investigators located blood evidence inside his rental car. The prosecution built a circumstantial case, which brought about Carpenter's arrest in 1992 on a first-degree murder charge. At the trial, in September 1994, the defense successfully argued that physical evidence was lost and no weapon linked the suspect to the crime, leading to Carpenter's acquittal on November 1, 1994. Under the law, this acquittal did not prove innocence or guilt, but rather a failure of the state to satisfy the burden of proof. No later indictments have resolved the homicide, and the case remains officially unsolved. Colonel Hogan always escaped the trap before the episode ended. Bob Crane's real homicide left an evidentiary record, but no final legal answer. The man who wore the monocle of the most incompetent commandant in the Luftwaffe had once run for his life from the very regime he mocked. Born Werner Klemperer on March 22, 1920, in Cologne, Germany. He was the son of the legendary conductor Otto Klemperer. In 1935, his Jewish family fled Germany, traveling through Paris and London before finding safety in the United States. He served in the U.S. Army Special Services at Fort Bliss during World War II, later building a career in classical music, Broadway theater, and dramatic television. When offered the role of Colonel Klink, Klemperer agreed under one strict written condition: Klink must never succeed in his schemes. The writers had to make the bumbling commandant lose every single week. This deliberate humiliation of Nazi authority earned him 2 Primetime Emmy Awards in 1968 and 1969. Klemperer married 3 times, finding his final partner in actress Kim Hamilton, whom he married in 1997. He spent his post-series years acting in theater and narrating orchestral concerts, before dying of cancer on December 6, 2000 in New York City. Klink treated rank as a shield, but every scheme collapsed into foolishness. Klemperer used the performance's limits to make that authority unworthy of respect. The man behind the sitcom's most famous denials had escaped a real authoritarian regime. Born Johann Banner on January 28, 1910, his birthplace remains unresolved between conflicting records in Vienna and Stanislaus. He studied law at the University of Vienna and worked on the European stage before his life was upended. As a Jew, he fled Austria following the 1938 Anschluss, arriving in America as a political refugee. While Banner found safety, Many of his relatives perished in the Holocaust. During World War II, he served as a supply sergeant in the U.S. Army Air Forces, unwittingly preparing for his signature role. On set, he turned Schultz into a beloved, bumbling captor, shouting his legendary line, "I know nothing, I see nothing, nothing." Banner married Elizabeth Roudnitz in 1940, and later Christine Gemen in 1965. After years of character acting, he returned to Vienna, where he died on his 63rd birthday, January 28, 1973, from an abdominal aortic hemorrhage. Schultz performed ignorance to avoid responsibility. Banner's real history belonged to a world in which silence could not erase what had happened. The cheerful gourmet cooking Corporal Louis Lebeau brought high-energy comedy to Stalag 13, yet the skin beneath his wool sleeve carried a permanent mark of the 20th century's darkest trauma. Born Robert Max Weiderman in Paris, with official archives recording his birth on March 1, 1926, the entertainer was professionally known as Robert Clary. He began singing publicly as a child before the German occupation shattered his youth. In September 1942, at age 16, he was deported to the Ottmuth labor camp and later transferred to Buchenwald. He survived 31 months of slave labor and starvation before Allied forces liberated the camp in April 1945. 12 members of his immediate family, including his parents, perished in the Holocaust. Throughout all 168 episodes of the sitcom, the blue ink of camp tattoo A5714 remained on his left forearm, carefully kept out of camera range by the production crew. Clary married Natalie Cantor in 1953, finding lifelong companionship with her until her death in 1997. In his later years, he traveled across America speaking at schools, providing testimonies for the USC Shoah Foundation, and ensuring the historical record of the camps remained unbroken. As the last surviving principal cast member of the series, he died of natural causes at his home in Los Angeles on November 16, 2022, at the age of 96. LeBeau survived the fictional camp through wit. Clary survived the real one and spent the rest of his life insisting that memory be taken seriously. Which Stalag 13 character or line do you still quote today? Tell us in the comments below. Whether it is Schultz shouting, "I know nothing, I see nothing," Klink dropping his monocle in panic, or Hogan flashing his trademark smirk, these simple gestures remain timeless nostalgic shorthand. To ensure this history is preserved with absolute accuracy, every date, trial verdict, and cause of death in this documentary comes directly from primary sources rather than recycled trivia. Born Colin Lionel M. on July 20th, 1932 in Gosport, Hampshire, England, he honed his comedy skills in British variety shows and stand-up clubs before crossing the Atlantic to find American stardom. On the sitcom, he played Corporal Peter Newkirk, the quick-witted, lock-picking mimic who could imitate almost any voice to fool the camp guards. But his greatest fame lay ahead. From 1976 to 1995, he hosted Family Feud, where his warm, flamboyant style earned him the nickname of the Kissing Bandit, puckering up for an estimated total of over 2,000 female contestants during his long run. Among those players was Gretchen Johnson, a former contestant he famously kissed on air and later married in 1991, decades after his first marriage to popular actress Diana Dors, with whom he had his daughter, Tracy Dawson, ended in a 1970 divorce. He remained a beloved, highly active television fixture until his death from esophageal cancer on June 2nd, 2012, in Los Angeles at age 79. Newkirk escaped through fast talk and quick hands. Dawson escaped typecasting by turning charm into a second television empire. Born Ivan Dixon on April 6, 1931 in Harlem, New York, the future director began his journey far from the Hollywood mainstream. He pursued drama studies at North Carolina Central University, graduating in 1954, before earning critical acclaim on Broadway and starring in the landmark 1964 film Nothing But a Man. On the sitcom, Dixon spent 5 seasons portraying Technical Sergeant James Kinchlow, the quiet, essential communications specialist. Recognizing that the role was undemanding, he chose to depart after the 5th season to expand his authority. Dixon turned his focus to directing, helming the controversial 1973 feature The Spook Who Sat by the Door, and directing dozens of television episodes for primetime hits like Magnum, P.I., and The A-Team. Beyond his professional achievements, family records confirm his 1954 marriage to Burley Ray, with whom he raised 4 children. On March 16, 2008, Dixon died in Charlotte, North Carolina, from complications of kidney failure. Kinchlow kept the escape network running from inside the camp. Dixon built a career by controlling the story from behind the camera. The woman who played the camp's glamorous gatekeeper lived a life that extended far beyond her association with a tragic Hollywood headline. Born Patricia Annette Olson on September 21, 1935 in Bakersfield, California, she worked in modeling and pursued formal dramatic studies before acting. As Fraulein Hilda, Colonel Klink's secretary, she became a steady, recognizable presence in the commandant's outer office. On May 5, 1970, she married Crane on the Hogan's Heroes set itself, later raising their son, Robert III, and maintaining their family life. After Crane's 1978 murder, she built a quiet existence away from the glare of tabloid publicity, later entering a reported marriage to John M. McCarthy. She died of lung cancer at age 72. While some accounts cited her death as October 19th, official records place her passing on October 14th, 2007. Hilda watched Stalag 13's bureaucracy from the sidelines. Valdis continued living beyond the sitcom while carrying the consequences of a real marriage. The gentle demolitions man of Stalag 13 was in reality a creative mind who built television from the page. Born Larry Hovis on February 20th, 1936, in Wapato, Washington, on the Yakima Indian Reservation, he moved to Houston, Texas as a child. There he developed his talent as a singer in school choirs and local clubs. On the sitcom, Sergeant Andrew Carter was initially a minor character, but Hovis's nervous energy expanded the role into a central comedic force. After the series ended, Hovis shifted his focus, writing television scripts for The Love Boat and The Bionic Woman, while contributing as a creative writer to popular game shows like Match Game and The New Price is Right. Off-screen, his foundation was his 1960 marriage to Patricia Pat Hovis, with whom he raised 2 children. He died from cancer on September 9, 2003 in Los Angeles, at the age of 67. Carter was always preparing the next blast. Hovis quietly prepared the next generation of television episodes. How could a weekly comedy set in a German prisoner of war camp find its strongest defenders among the very people who had suffered under the Third Reich? For decades, critics and veterans groups argued that the show trivialized historical trauma, sparking broadcast resistance and temporary bans in parts of West Germany and Austria. Yet, the actors who lived through the era saw a different truth. Leon Askin, who survived escape from Austria to play General Burkhalter, joined Werner Klemperer, John Banner, and Robert Clary in an intentional subversion. For these Jewish performers, comedy was a weapon. Klemperer consistently maintained that their goal was to make these officers look foolish rather than heroic. Clary, who endured the horrors of Buchenwald, argued that the series allowed survivors to turn the tables, transforming their former tormentors into the butt of the joke. Banner similarly used the bumbling Schultz to ridicule the inner absurdities of the regime, while Askin welcomed the opportunity to mock the figures who had once hunted his own family. To them, mocking the enemy did not diminish the memory of those who died. Rather, they believed that making their captors look ridiculous. Every single week was a powerful act of defiance. Both realities exist side by side, a premise that remains uncomfortable to later generations, and a cast that found liberation in laughter. The fictional captors demanded respect. The real performers used comedy to deny them that respect. By 2026, every named principal performer from the series had passed away. Their final resting places span 2 continents, though several require official cemetery verification to separate documented fact from rumor. Bob Crane rests at Oakwood Memorial Park in Chatsworth, California, despite public confusion linking his name to Hollywood forever. Werner Klemperer's burial location remains unverified. John Banner was buried in Vienna, though the exact cemetery and plot require confirmation. Robert Clary and Larry Hovis are both reported to lie at Hollywood forever, and Leon Askin at Vienna Central Cemetery, though none of these claims are officially verified. Richard Dawson is reported at Westwood Village Memorial Park, the same cemetery where Sigrid Valdis rests in an unmarked plot. Ivan Dixon's reported resting place at St. Paul's Episcopal Church Cemetery in Charlotte, North Carolina, remains unverified. Across its run from 1965 to 1971, producing 168 episodes, the sitcom remained a defiance of history, with Robert Clary ultimately standing as the real camp survivor who outlived every fictional captor he portrayed. The strangest sitcom premise in history was carried by men whose real lives were braver than anything the writers ever dared to invent. Subscribe for more carefully researched stories behind classic television. 6 decades later, the laughter remains, but its echo has grown profoundly deeper. We now see past the caricatures to the quiet triumphs of the survivors who wore those uniforms. Their defiance didn't just challenge the screen, it reclaimed their history. In the end, the strangest sitcom premise in history was carried by men whose real lives were braver than anything the writers ever dared to invent.